Hello, everyone, and welcome to the December 16th episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we highlight topics that impact our local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. We had our, we usually like to host a little like Christmas white elephant Friendsgiving sort of party around this time of year.
Right.
So we did that this past weekend with some of our friends here in the neighborhood. And that was a lot of fun. It always is. I didn't eat enough. I usually, like sometimes when you're hosting, you run around and like you just kind of forget to eat.
You're
So I ended up,
busy, right?
yeah, I only had like 3 or 4 beers, but I was not feeling good the next morning, and I forgot to eat. So you know what? It happens. But the party was a lot of fun. It was also my brother's birthday, so we got like a really nice. I don't even remember. It was like cookie cream, like butter cream, like cookie butter, like the words cream and butter were in there a few times, but it was delicious. And we do like a little. I pre-bake a bunch of like small pizza doughs, so we do like a build your own pizza kind of thing, and it's fun. White
Right.
Elephant's a great time, so yeah, it's just kind of fun to do that. So that was a good time.
That's good. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and, because it is our last show of 2025, so and we do have a bit to cover, so we're going to kind of jump right into things here. And that really is going to be the main focus of this episode, is kind of look back at 2025 and see what some of the big stories were, especially for us and our focus of what we do on the podcast. So we'll dissect that a little bit and maybe do a little looking ahead to what we might try to do in 2026. And before that, like we always do, we'll cover some of the news, because again, it seems like there's lots of stuff going on, especially in terms of international football and FIFA and World Cup stuff. So we'll cover that news here in just a second. But we'll kick it off, as we always do now, with a little soccer history. Today, we are not going to do San Diego specific soccer history, rather just more global soccer history. And on this date, the 16th of December in 1899, was the formation of AC Milan as a soccer club. Now that date is somewhat disputed. There are some historians that argue that it was on the 18th, but the club officially recognizes the 16th as the founding. Now their founding documents have been lost over the course of history, so they're not 100% sure, but the club recognizes the 16th, so we are going to recognize the 16th as the founding for AC Milan. So back in 1899, we had the founding of AC Milan. It was founded by an English expat called Herbert Klippen, and it was originally called the Milan Football and Cricket Club. And if you've listened to any of our podcasts before, not surprising at all that cricket was heavily tied to the foundation of a lot of these original clubs.
Funny that cricket didn't really have the staying power in Italia that the Calcio did.
Right. But I thought we couldn't really find anything. I mean, that was part of it for the San Diego history for this date. So we opted for something a little bigger. And I think that is certainly a club that most people recognize. So,
well, and I think
been around
too,
now for 125 years.
Yeah, I mean, surely one of, I guess people more modernly would point to Juventus, but I think historically, probably Italy's most successful club, if not the one of the most successful clubs in Italy. They've won like 8 or 9 European Cups, I think. So they're, historically a colossal club, even if they're not quite what they once were right now. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure at its foundation, AC Milan only allowed Englishmen or Italians to play, and that's where Internazionale, Inter Milan, comes from. Was they a club for more international players?
Right, exactly. That was part of the dispute about 9 years later. I think it was 1908. But there was a dispute on having international players play for AC Milan. There were people who felt strongly against it and people who felt for it. So that was the formation of Inter. They broke off, and hence the name, if you're paying attention.
Right.
You recognize which of the teams or groups were opting for international players. But yes, AC Milan did not, as the core group of people, I guess, or the people who stayed with AC Milan did not want to really invest heavily in international players as part of their club, but Inter did. So they
I
split.
I always just think that's interesting because I think a lot of people in the modern day, it's funny, you see the Internazionale written out and it's like one of those cognates where it seems too obvious. You're like, there's no way that means what I
Right.
think it means. But nope, the clubs are exactly what
That's
you would guess
exactly
based
it.
on the names. And the club's history are intrinsically tied together the way you might expect two clubs who have always shared a stadium to be tied together. So, well, not always, but for a
Right.
very long time shared a stadium. Anyway,
For a very
yeah,
long time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Italian football has always been a fascination of mine. You know, my family comes from Sicily on my mom's side, so I've always kind of had a soft spot in that way. And Italy also is, as far as I know, the only country in the Western world and one of the few countries in the world that doesn't use some derivation of football or soccer for their name of the sport. Calcio literally is the first person singular verb conjugation of the verb to kick. It means I kick, and that's what they call it in Italy. So that is just like a fun, I don't know, I've always like fun little tidbit about Italian soccer.
Yeah, and let's we'll go from Italian soccer to, world
Sure.
soccer and look at some FIFA stuff because of course, we can't go a week without some news about, usually not good news about the 2026 Men's World Cup. But we did get somewhat, at least I saw in the Sports Business Journal, some confirmation about FIFA actively negotiating with networks regarding commercial opportunities during the hydration breaks. So, not that anybody is remotely surprised by that, but that was the first like official thing that I'd saw from last show to this show that FIFA is actively pursuing whatever that means, commercial opportunities. I
It
imagine
means
it's
exactly
just
what you think it
standard
means.
commercial break,
Yeah.
but especially with them saying those hydration breaks were mandatory. They were going to be in every match, in every half. They were going to fall in a certain time period and they were going to last 3 minutes long. That's a commercial break.
Right.
That's
And
there's nothing else. There's nothing about player safety really in that.
and here's the thing, honestly, a mandated hydration break in each half, maybe the 3 minutes is a bit excessive, but a mandated hydration break, I don't inherently have an issue with. Like maybe the set time is a little bit iffy, but say you gave it like, 2 minutes leeway either side of that time. Like I think that's somewhat reasonable. Like I said, the mandated 3 minutes is a bit ridiculous, but it's just the cynicism with which they've approached it. It's like they're not even trying to
Yeah.
hide it because why would they? I mean, this is like, the richest and most openly corrupt country now in a long time in the history of the world, maybe. So it's just like whatever. Why would you not?
Yeah. Well, then that'll take us right into the whole thing about tickets, which of course the prices
Yeah.
have been escalating. If you look at the even
Well, it's dynamic.
FIFA resale portal, right? Because of the dynamic pricing and everything else, the ticket prices have just skyrocketed. Now, will they come back down or crash down like they did for the Club World Cup? Who knows? But with quite a bit of outside pressure, and I think this is the thing that can happen when outside groups put enough pressure. FIFA did respond and announced there were going to be, and I'll say a very, very small amount of tickets reserved for supporters and tickets to go through the national associations. I think $60 was one of the prices I saw, but it was a little confusing, some of the things I was reading, because there was a tier 1 and a tier 2, and there were all these different prices, but there were some designated for, I'll call it diehard supporters. But again, it's up to the FA for how those tickets will be distributed or allocated. And what I saw is 1,000 tickets. Now, I don't think that's 1,000 per team. I think that's 1,000 total, if I understood correctly. So about 500 for each group, which, is not terrible. Well, actually, I'll say it is terrible.
It is terrible.
It's not great. It's absolutely terrible.
It's not nothing, I believe.
It's
is
not
what you were
nothing,
looking for.
exactly. It's not nothing, but it is, to me, the good news about all of this is when you put pressure, when it comes from lots of different areas, FIFA can and usually does respond, and most soccer governing bodies do. They don't like the pushback. Um, but my fear with this is great. You put some pressure on. This is where you really ratchet up the pressure even more. But I would imagine there's enough people that if they're able to get one of these cheaper tickets or however that is being worked out, they're like, great. Selfishly, I got my ticket, so I don't care about anybody else. There won't be the bigger pressure, and this little offering that FIFA did is going to be it. It's not going to have any lasting effect on the rest of the prices unless people keep up the pressure on this. But this whole ticket price thing for this next World Cup is just, it'll be interesting to see how it continues. Do the prices just keep escalating? Is there a crash at some point and people are trying to offload tickets? They thought they could flip them at some point and then they couldn't. It'll be interesting because we saw what happened with the Club World Cup. The World Cup is different in terms of the type of people who show up and the history behind it and everything else. So,
and the people who would pay a lot of money just to be able to say they
and
went
the people
to a
who would pay a lot of money.
Yeah. I oh boy, I have a lot to say on that.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm unfortunately really unsurprised. I mean, the cancerous strain of capitalism that is American capitalism has been sticking its tendrils into world football for a while now, in the form of private equity and multi-club ownership. But I think this will be a really emphatic landing of American-style capitalism on the world football stage because, I mean, even in Qatar, with all the ridiculous restrictions, the ticket prices were actually still reasonable, I would call them.
Yes.
From a perspective of an American who's used to stupid ticket prices. So this is another ratchet up, and really the only reason we're doing it is because this is just what we're used to here, and we can, the rest of the world, it's the World Cup. This is one of the few events where people will suck it up and deal with it. It's literally once in a lifetime for most of these people. I know. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's also in some parts, especially in the US, there's this attitude of almost a pride of the ticket prices going
up. 100%.
Look how the prices going higher and higher somehow means it's better, or it's better for the US, or look, people want to come here, or whatever the weird warped version of escalating prices somehow inflates my worth as an American citizen. That has always baffled me. And I really it doesn't help, right? It doesn't help get the ticket prices back down for, as we talk about all the time in soccer, the common everyday people being able to afford to go because they're the ones that create the atmosphere in the matches. And otherwise you make it a sterile environment. And I think that's when, I don't watch the NFL. I haven't for a while now, a long time, but even before I stopped watching American football, I always felt the Super Bowl was a very sterile athletic contest.
Especially compared to literally any, and I mean, I only watch 49ers games. I'm not an NFL fan at this point in my life. I only watch NFL in the capacity of the 49ers because that's the team I grew up rooting for. It's ingrained in me, right? That said, any given NFL regular season game has a better atmosphere than the Super Bowl for exactly the reasons you've just described.
Yeah. It gets to be, and I'm afraid, I think one of the things that we had seen with the better ability for people to travel, say since we hosted it last time, that how many more people traveled to go see their national team play, and the large groups of people that were in cities that sat in sections that brought the atmosphere to matches over the last few World Cups, especially through the 2000s and the 20 teens. Um, I think that just improved over time. But now, like you said, like we've got to this stage where it's just, you know, Infantino proudly saying it's going to be like, I don't know how many games there are, 109 Super Bowls or whatever the thing is. And to me, like, yeah, that just sounds miserable. That
Well,
doesn't
and
sound like anything I want
it's
to be a part of.
I'm not going to say it's a uniquely American thing, but I will say it's a distinctly American thing. And I do feel comfortable saying that because by virtue of watching a lot of European soccer, on the internet, run in a lot of like less American populated discussion spaces. And I've been to the
Yeah.
Spurs Stadium a couple times and I make a point to talk with locals that I can find and chat with, right? I love talking with people at sports games. That's one of my very favorite pastimes. Um, and I get the impression when I talk to like non-Americans or people who are familiar with non-American kind of sports spaces, like when you talk about high ticket prices, it's like shameful, right? Like Tottenham
Yeah.
have one of the highest season ticket prices, if not the highest in the Premier League, and that's like a mark of shame amongst the fans. Whereas you look at like the NBA, and teams that are good, they have their skyrocketing ticket prices, and fans are like, well, that's something to be proud of. That's the cost of business,
That's the
you know?
cost of business, right? That's a phrase
Exactly.
we hear all the time. The
And
cost of
it's like,
success.
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and it's funny how people can like say that and then turn around and talk about parody, right? But whatever, I digress. But it's just a different mindset. And so, right, like when people, it's this weird mashing of the American mindset about sports prices and the rest of the world, the way they look at it as this kind of like layman's game. Um, and it's really cynical, but I, I fear it's gonna pay off. They're gonna make a bunch of money from these games, and they'll look at this as the model going forward. Unfortunately, because the people making these decisions don't give a flying fuck if the atmosphere is sterile if they're making their money.
If they're making their money, right?
Yeah.
And and the thing is, as the general population, I mean, there are some people who are very rich who are going to pay and are going to show up. We see that with all big events. But the bulk of the people, I mean, there's a lot of people that could just choose to not go or boycott. I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, you know, I, I could see a scenario, I don't think it'll happen, but where a lot of, especially American soccer fans, decide to go watch in pubs or do something else, like not going to the stadium, not paying the
I'll tell you
money,
what,
not
it'd be a
going,
better
not giving
better
FIFA the
atmosphere.
money.
Yeah.
It would be a way better atmosphere.
There are few places
But
I've ever been with a better atmosphere than a pub during a game that matters.
right. And if you know, if people can create those spaces where, people can still enjoy the athletic event and really try to distance themselves from contributing to FIFA specifically and the money. Um, yeah, I think it is something that could be done. It would take some organization, but I think there's too many people that would. I think there would be enough people who are willing to mortgage their house, whatever, to make sure they attended the event.
Yeah.
Because like it's a
Well,
feather in the cap.
and I can to speak to both sides of that. I can tell you when the World Cup was announced as being in the United States, however 7 years ago, whatever it was. All my soccer watching friends and I have a group chat, and that group chat was blowing up with like, we're gonna get to a game, like we'll all figure out a city. And I can't speak to all of them, to be totally honest. A lot of us have grown apart. There's a couple of them I still talk to, and we are all kind of like, we maybe could afford it if we like really focused on saving, but I don't think we really want to. Like
Yeah.
Gabby, my partner, is turning 30 next year. I think we're going to go to Greece for her 30th birthday, and like that won't directly overlap, but it's like at this point in my life, and I cannot believe I'm saying this. If Gabby can hear me, no disrespect to her 30th birthday. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would so much rather go to Greece for her 30th than like spend that money on whatever the fuck this World Cup is going to be. Because it's just
Yeah.
like, from a personal standpoint, like it's just really gross. And I'm not like, I don't know. It's it's hard because I want so bad, because the last time the World Cup was in the US was the year I was born, right? Like this should be like a big kind of full circle moment for me, and it's just not. But to speak to the other side of that, I know that there will be people who will suck it up and buy. I have a friend who I was just talking to the other day whose family is all like, you know, descendants of or are direct immigrants from Ghana, and Ghana got drawn for a game in Philadelphia, and they all live in Philly. And like, guess what? They're gonna fucking move heaven and earth to be at that game, and I don't blame them. And so it's like, it's just that kind of, there's that two-sided dynamic. Like, there are those of us who, you know, maybe you could call it like a privileged position, just be like, nah, fuck this, I'm gonna do something else with my money. And then there are those people who are like, this is my chance to see my country play in a World Cup, and I'll be damned if I'm gonna fucking miss it. So it's
Right.
and you can't really fault either of those perspectives, is the thing.
I can't fault the perspective of the person like you described, but I can fault someone like FIFA who knows
Oh,
exactly
sure.
there are going to be people like that to move heaven and earth, and they are flat out gouging them.
This is a very good example of the don't hate the player, hate the game. Like the people who
Right.
are gonna do what they can to be at these games are not doing anything wrong. Like, they should enjoy their lives. It's the people exploiting that passion who are doing something wrong.
Yeah. Well, for those who might want to come from outside of the US into the US to come to the World Cup, the Trump administration has announced that to get a visa now you have to from certain countries that we used to have, agreements with. It was pretty easy to get a visa, someplace like England.
Well, visa-free travel was the status quo for the longest time, right?
Right. But now, in addition to the costs and things they're doing, but it's sharing 5 years of your social media history to come. So
we haven't given one of these reminders in a while, John, so I'm sorry to interject, but this is a great reminder to delete your Twitter account.
Yes.
Can't submit something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. So we certainly have that, which, there's already human rights groups that are all up in arms.
Well, I've seen didn't they say they were going to reject visas for like any Haitian fans I saw?
Okay, so I mean, we already have travel bans. That's the next thing here. We already
Right.
travel bans against
Haitian,
Iran and Haiti, but we just added two new ones this
Iran,
week. So Senegal
right?
and
Senegal.
the Ivory Coast.
Really?
Just added. Yeah.
Is there like, I mean, and oh my God, I know the answer before I ask this. Is there even a stated reason?
I did not look at the stated reason. I just saw the article. I skimmed through the article by Adam Crafton.
Thinly veiled racism, right? Is probably the reason.
Well, I mean, yeah. Look at the countries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Two very dominant historically African footballing countries as well. It's worth noting.
Yeah, and they each, I believe, if I remember correctly, have 2 games in the U.S. I think their third game for each of them is either Canada or Mexico. I don't remember which, but 2 of their matches will be in the U.S. So, yeah, I just wonder how many new countries will get added to the list before we actually get to the tournament.
You know what? Let me actually take a different perspective on this, and I'm for all these travel bans because this is how the U.S. is going to win a World Cup. Just fucking ban everybody.
Yeah, well, we'll see on that.
World champs 2026, baby.
The one bit of good news, I will call it good news from my perspective. Seattle officials, they're having their pride match, and it's Egypt and Iran, and they've come out and said, we're doing our pride match. Now,
because it has nothing to do with the World Cup. It's there. Right. It's Seattle, the city.
Right. FIFA controls the stadium and what happens in the stadium. So they're really, I mean, it really wasn't going to be anything in that stadium as long as FIFA is controlling what happens within the stadium grounds. But all around the city and everywhere else, and Seattle controls that. And they absolutely should do their normal pride celebrations, or you know what? Go overboard this time.
Do a spiteful one. Because I'll tell you what, and I've got a buddy who identifies as queer and lives in Seattle, and he would agree with this. I don't think you could find a city that better fits the description, that is the combination of spite and queerness. Seattle is that city. So I expect them to go big.
I hope so. And again, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but good to see, at least for now, Seattle sticking to their guns. And I would imagine it's probably going to be
Well,
people
their
are going to
DSA
be
backs
ready
mayor
to
getting
celebrate.
yeah, they elected it was much less covered because Seattle's obviously not as big of a city, but they elected their own Zoran Mamdani type candidate in Seattle for mayor. So she'll be sworn in by then too. So you would
And that was
expect
tight. That was a tight
it was
race.
literally hundreds of votes. Yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, I got a good buddy who lives in Seattle though, so I was paying close attention. Katie Wilson, no relation. She so I would expect she as mayor would not, succumb to that kind of nonsense, hopefully.
Yeah. I would imagine, and we'll see. And that's one of the storylines I'm actually looking forward to. And another one, I mean, we mentioned last week, I'd mentioned that there was an ethics complaint filed against Infantino through the FIFA ethics committee. Haven't heard anything new on that front, but I did see also that, a lot of this stuff gets buried with all the inflammatory stuff that's happening with ticket prices and everything else. But Swiss lawmakers, they're looking to possibly revoke FIFA's tax exempt status. And it has to do specifically with the Israeli FA and the Gaza settlements and having some of their teams play in illegal settlements. But it's something in some way it violates the terms of their nonprofit status. So again, another thing to kind of see. It'll be interesting if there is a ban on Israel, if it happens because it potentially hits FIFA in the pocketbook as
What you're
opposed
saying
to
is
any other issue.
the genocide going on in Gaza is going to get the Al Capone treatment. It finally gets stopped over
Yeah.
tax issues. That's
Exactly.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I didn't think about that. So anyway, that's most of the World Cup stuff. FIFA also is starting to announce their awards, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but in something that ties a little more directly to what's happening here, especially in women's soccer. I mean, we had the FIFA 11, and not a single NWSL player on the FIFA 11, I believe. If I remember
John
correctly, they were
froze, or maybe I did.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Please stand by. Oh, okay, there we go. You were saying something about
Right.
about the FIFA 11.
Yeah, that I don't believe there was any NWSL players on there for what is supposed to be the top league in the world. If you hear Jessica Berman talk about it, especially as we're having all these contract disputes with Trinity Rodman and their CBA and their salary cap and all this stuff in the news, and then FIFA does their awards. Now, I mean, to be a little more realistic, FIFA always has a Eurocentric bias in everything. They always have. It's hard for South Americans, Africans, like anybody really to break in unless they are playing on a team in Europe.
Right.
I mean, very difficult. So, that aside, I'm not really taking terrible exception to who they named on the 11, but more in the NWSL, they're like, we're the best league in the world. And really, to me, the attitude of, well, we don't have to worry about what's going on in Europe because we're the best league in the world. And then when Europe or FIFA really starts doing their awards and they're all kind of European based, this should be a huge red flag to the owners in the NWSL that, the writing is on the wall. We've talked about this. You're going to be overtaken pretty quickly. Maybe not in terms of salary right away, or maybe people paying more, like we've seen Chelsea do and get lots of players, but just the whole perception that more and more Europe will stop looking west and recognizing NWSL. It's likely to become more of an afterthought as things get built up within Europe, and that recognition keeps going to Europe, which in turn, I believe that if there are good Americans playing here in the NWSL or any good players, they will, over the next few years, start recognizing this pattern also and say, hey, I need to be playing in Europe, just like they do on the men's side.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues that go into this dynamic, but I agree it should be a red flag for NWSL, but I fear that it won't be, um, because while they need to raise the salary cap, and I think a lot of NWSL fans recognize that, I think another kind of facet of the dynamic of difference between American sports fandom and like the rest of the world vis-a-vis soccer fandom, football, whatever, calcio, um, is that we kind of have this like normalized concept of a salary cap and how that affects like the league dynamic, right? Like, so
Right.
American soccer fans will look at the NWSL and say it's the best league in the world because of the parity as defined by like who has success season over season, right? Um, and I guess if that's how you want to look at it, if that's your measure of success of a league, like that is fair. But the rest of the world kind of doesn't give a shit about that concept. Like they view salary caps as kind of a limit on labor's earning potential, which
Right.
truthfully is more kind of how I view it. But I also understand the parity argument because it's kind of ingrained in our sports psyche. But that is not a standing on which to like be a top league in the world, right? That's the top to bottom competitiveness is great, but like that's just not what makes a top league. What makes the NBA the top basketball league in the world, what makes the MLB the top baseball league in the world, what makes the NFL the top football league in the world is that they have the best players. Full stop. It is the end all be all argument. Like the best basketball players play in the NBA. Doesn't matter that Serbia has way better atmospheres, which they do. I actually watched the highlights of the Belgrade Derby the other day because it popped up on my YouTube and I was like, that seems fun. This is EuroLeague basketball. The atmosphere is incredible, but the level of play was clearly not as high. The NWSL is quickly throwing away that advantage, and they can talk about parity all they want, and that will appeal to a lot of their fans, but at the end of the day, that's not going to help their standing on the world stage.
Yeah. It's not. And I mean, as a total aside, we see the continual development of the pyramids on the women's side. That again, that bottom up pressure of teams trying to get into that first division, forcing those other teams that are already in the first division to stay on top of their game, unless for fear of being relegated, is they have a better infrastructure right now. We had the lead. I mean, Title IX, it wasn't anything special that Americans did. I mean, it was a government intervention with Title IX that that not kind of did open up women's sports and female sports. So we had a huge leg up on the rest of the world. And
I think a lot of
I
people
think we
don't. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't
yeah,
think a lot of people realize the degree to which Title IX like is the reason, full stop, that the U.S. won like 4 of the first 6 Women's World Cups. Like, and I don't mean to discredit those achievements; they were incredible. I enjoyed watching the ones I was alive for, or cognizant of. But like Title IX, like is full stop the reason the U.S. was able to win those World Cups.
yeah, it's the reason we have been so competitive on a variety of sports around the world, because we don't do state sponsored sports like many
Right.
countries do, especially at the national level. Um, but it was forced. I mean, it was forced upon schools and different groups that if they wanted, especially to have the sports for the boys and the males, they had to open it up. Which of course they did. They didn't want to lose that, so reluctantly, they they opened up and did girls sports, and it's been a constant battle since the early 70s. But it paid off for us in terms of having, much better soccer players,
Right.
when those World Cups rolled around,
We
even
had
though we
near
didn't.
professional or professional level trained athletes, and the rest of the world didn't. Like, it really was that simple.
And now, a lot of the world is catching up to us. And, I think if we do not pay attention to some of the signs that are out there, if we want to maintain our top level status, I think we will always be strongly competitive. But if we really want to be up there at the top, I think we need to get rid of this American exceptionalism kind of idea. Like, we have the best women's athletes in the world, so we're just always going to be the best. And we see how quickly some of these other countries, their players, their club teams, their leagues are rapidly advancing year on, year out, where I don't know that we're seeing the same level of progress in the women's game here in the US, especially if we look at the NWSL, because there's no pressure on there once you have a team. Like, you're in, you have players. Another player might come and take your spot, but not another whole team coming to take another whole team's spot. I mean, that creates a very different pressure environment.
I mean, I
And
think as far as the national team is concerned, all you really need to look at is 2023, right? Was the last Women's World Cup. That was the first one really ever, at least in my lifetime, but I think you could really say ever, where the US was really not a factor as far as favorites to win the tournament were concerned. I mean, I know some homers would tell you otherwise, but I think if you're taking a realistic, objective perspective, the US was never involved in that conversation. And that was the first
yeah,
time in my life that that was the case. And it's for exactly the reasons you were just describing.
right. And I think it was a bit of a wake up call to some
I
people,
hope
but
it was. I hope it was. I'm not sure
but
it
I don't
has
know that
been,
it
but
was
I hope it
enough.
was. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not enough of one.
Well,
I agree.
right. Well, sticking with women's soccer in the US, I was really pleased to see, and I don't know who initiated it, but I saw that come February, there is going to be a Texas derby between the Houston Dash of the NWSL and the Dallas Trinity of the USL Super League.
Hell yeah. Love
So
that.
they're going to just do a friendly, basically at the Cotton Bowl. That's supposed to be February 28th, I
Love
believe,
that.
is the
Oh,
date.
man.
But yeah, I don't know who started that. I hope we see more of it. And again, like, I don't know what happened this last summer to the Brandy Chastain Cup that was supposed to start. It's like we had a couple of the teams play at one point who won, like the USLW and the WPSL, and I think we had like a semifinals, but I don't know that the finals ever happened. And we really need an Open Cup on the women's side.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would be, especially because the women's soccer has so much more like grassroots momentum than men's soccer does in the United States. Like a women's Open Cup, I feel like you would genuinely get more like, in the FA Cup or like any other national tournament in a more established footballing country, you would genuinely get like these smaller amateur pre-professional teams making deep runs on the women's side than you do on the men's side.
Yeah.
Just because, again, I think the grassroots momentum on the women's side with things like the USLW is just stronger than it is on the men's side.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would be so much fun to watch
Oh,
that and see how
100%.
that would take off around the country. It just, I just really don't know why.
Clubs like what was it, Minnesota Aurora or whatever I want to say with the
Right.
really
Yeah.
awesome badge. They would go crazy hard for an Open Cup. Like they would put everything they had into that. A club
Yeah.
like that, all those clubs in USLW that take it seriously, they would go so hard. Like it,
I,
and I'd love to give them that chance.
right. And I think it would help open the eyes to a lot of people of how many lower league clubs we have that have some good, strong players on them. That the
Yeah.
opportunities are there if we build the structure for it. Let's switch over to the men's side with MLS, and we'll do USL here just afterwards, because we are in the off season. We're getting schedule releases and everything. But on the MLS side, I was, for me, incredibly disappointed to see that the Leagues Cup is returning and you are having 18 MLS teams compete against the
So that's
18.
all the non-Open Cup teams, correct?
No.
Oh.
So there's going to be people who are going to be in Leagues Cup and Open Cup because there's 16 teams that are going to be in the
So there will be 4
Open
overlaps, presumably.
So there's going to be quite a few overlaps, quite a few actually. And I think it's actually I don't know if the people who are in the CONCACAF. I'd have to look at the teams for the league. I didn't even go look at the teams because I was just like, I was like, man, I can't. I hope this was the opportunity that they would get rid of it. But also, I mean, not lost on me that here is Major League Soccer putting out the Leagues Cup tournament. They've already, like, these are teams taking place in the Open Cup, and we're doing the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And not a concern at all about congestion of schedule all of a sudden.
San Diego.
All of a sudden, we have no concerns about congestions of schedule.
San Diego FC is in the list of clubs included.
Yes. For the Leagues Cup?
Yes.
Yeah. So Champions Cup, then people will be in the Leagues Cup. So the Leagues Cup will be I think, then the top 18 by the Supporter Shield standings.
Cool.
So anyway, that's there. Not happy about it. I was really hoping this was going to be scrapped, and not sure why they're trying to force it, but it's going to then come right on the heels. Just weird to me. You're going to have a World Cup summer. You're going to have a weird schedule because of the World Cup summer. You're having the Leagues Cup go from early August to early September. I don't know. It seems like a bit of an overload, and it just seemed like the great opportunity to maybe go a year without it and kind of transition away from it. But clearly that's not happening.
Nope.
And then Vancouver, I don't know if you saw, there was big statement between the ownership of Vancouver and the mayor up there, and some kind of 4-year plan, and trying to do better stuff with the stadium. But to me, all this seemed to be for show. I don't not that I follow MLS too closely, but from my history of watching things evolve in American sports and in soccer, this to me seemed like a show. And it seems like as soon as a viable option somewhere else in the US opens up, then that Vancouver team is probably moving to a US city. And I would imagine probably a US city that already has a strong USL team.
I mean, yeah, I didn't realize that was that on the table, but that's super disappointing to hear, especially considering they just made the final and signed a guy like Thomas Muller. So,
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean, it would be no different than like we do with American sports. We'll just up and move the entire, not really franchises, but up and move the franchise to a whole new city.
No, they are franchises. In all American sports, they are franchises, literally.
Well, they're ownership opportunities. I mean, because everybody, you're a partner in the league. I don't know that they're true franchises in the
maybe
way
not. Yeah,
that we think of franchises for the other sports.
Well, yeah, maybe not. Not in the way the MLS is. Maybe not.
Yeah, and then USL also dropped a bunch of schedules, and so we've got like championship. I think has 25 teams this year because we got 2 new teams, so it's slightly unbalanced. You got 12 teams in the West and 13 in the East. So they will play everybody, well, at least in the West. In the West, they'll play everybody in the West home and away. They'll get those 22 games, and then they'll get a handful of other games for people over in the East. And on the East, there will be, just because of the way the schedule has to work out with an odd team there and playing some teams in the West, there's going to end up being some of the teams in the East that don't play everybody, or don't get the full home and away. Like they might get the away, but not the home, or the home, but not the away, just for that. But if I again saw correctly, I'd have to go back and check it. I think it was a 30 game schedule overall for the championship. But League One, they got 18 teams. They're playing a traditional home and away table, play
Good.
everybody.
They should, yeah.
And 34 games. So League One is going to have, if I saw it correctly, more games than championship. And then the USL Cup also got their schedule, and they're following the same similar format to what they did last year.
Speaking of the USL Cup, I did see that it looks like Jägermeister won't be the sponsor going forward, which was super disappointing. Let me see if I can find real quick.
Yeah, it's a tire company.
Yeah, something way less fun. Yeah, it's Prinks Tires.
Right.
You can't get drunk on that during commercial breaks, that's for sure. I totally lost my train of thought there. It is also the case in England that the second division plays more games than the first division.
That is true.
So, that's not totally like bizarre. I love that for the USL. That is a real like league number of teams. Like the Bundesliga is 18 teams.
Right.
Like 12 teams feels very very thin. I don't know. It depends on the country, right? Like Slovenia, the top flight is 10 teams, but Slovenia is also like the size of Rhode Island or like Connecticut. So like that makes sense. In a country like the US, like the top flight, or a division needs to feel very like coherent. I don't know. That was a bad comparison, but I'm excited to hear that for League One. I think playing a whole like home and home schedule that's how football needs to be done.
Right. I agree. And, we should have more teams coming into League One next year. So I don't know if they will, I don't know how many, right? It depends on all kinds of factors. There should be more teams coming into the championship, and we should be getting very close then to starting to separate or find out who the Division One teams are going to be, and whether or not they're going to start promotion relegation between championship and League One before they even start their Division One, which I think they should. I really think they should start
give
that.
Teams the right to earn their way in.
Yeah, but we'll see how that again plays out, and I don't obviously don't know what their plans are because they haven't shared their plans. But it was one of the things when we talked about, when I kind of did my proposal thing. My biggest thing is I hope they have a plan, and it would really be nice if they shared that plan of how they're trying to move forward. But I think they're still in the concepts of a plan stage.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be coming in 2 weeks. All right, Dylan, let's kind of wrap up our current events. So let's for our last show, spend a little time talking about some of the big stories either we covered or did, or just do a little recap here of 2025. And I'm going to toss it to you first. And if there's anything that stood out to you and big stories, things we covered, things you were proud about that we did, and anything for this last season on the LGS Pod.
Oh man. I feel like we've talked about so many things. It's hard for me to like pick just one. I really enjoyed the Japan episode. I feel like I learned a lot. And we've referenced it in pretty much every episode since because it's such a useful comparison.
Yeah.
And I think the timing was good because I think I mentioned this last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago. I think that Japan is going to be like a dominant force in the next generation of men's international football. I know on the women's side, they're already one of the best teams, but they have been doing all the right things in terms of development. It's been really interesting to watch. even just your casual Premier League fan will know the name Karu Mitsuma playing at Brighton is one of the most exciting players to watch in the league. But it goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the Japan episode, and I also, on like a total personal note, I've been playing. I've been getting more back into video games lately, and the games I've been playing are samurai inspired games. So I've been
Oh,
really like high on the Japanese culture. So that was well timed for me on a personal level.
yeah. I'm not sure I could pick a particular episode specifically, but I certainly as well have enjoyed the episodes where we did a deeper dive into history or history of the structure. Like we did our whole pro rail series looking at different countries, and that was part of that Japan one. But looking at the history, looking how the leagues developed, going through the history of player transfers. I think I might have done that one on my own. I don't remember now. Um, but doing some of those kind of historical dives has been fun. It's been fun to learn about those as well, and then bring them to the podcast so that we can talk about them. And I also, just in terms of, I don't know, big stories, rather than a specific podcast, I think to me, one of the biggest stories has been this year, and it's been the last few years, but the big money coming into top level soccer around
Yeah.
the world, and how that has influenced everything. I mean, really everything at that top level. And I also feel like we are starting to see pushback. We saw pushback through the idea of the Super League, right, during the pandemic. And we've seen pushback in different times, but I've seen more subtle pushback, I think. So the big money coming in, the sports washing, right? I think it's been a non-stop topic of conversation, especially in our current event topics. When we're looking at the news of the past week, it's the big money involved and how it's affecting things, not only at the top level, but then the domino effect of then, how it could affect the lower levels of soccer within each country. But then, you know, that leads to sports washing, the big money being in there. We're seeing it. I don't want to get into this so much, but in Africa, in Sudan, right? Like we're seeing some of these countries that are heavily involved in conflicts and things around the world that are using sport to help shield themselves from some things that are happening, or to divert attention away. So like that sports washing. And then I think part of that pushback is in this country, at least, and maybe it's because I'm looking for it. So I don't know. That very well could be it. But I have seen so many stories that we haven't necessarily talked about in the podcast, but of different groups getting together and forming their own teams locally here in this. But even say in England and other places, more local people getting together within their community and creating their own community teams to then enter at whatever level of a pyramid structure they have in their country and move up from there. And so maybe that's always happened. Maybe it's just getting more coverage. But I also feel like this is a little bit of a pushback with all the big money being at the top, that people are getting disgusted, they're getting frustrated, and they're diverting their attention now down to some of the lower leagues, grassroots soccer. I mean, that's us a little bit. Right? This is the whole reason, one of the reasons of starting this podcast and having these conversations is looking at what's going on outside of all the big leagues. So that to me has been a big kind of story and things we've covered in the podcast. But again, I don't know, that might just be because that's what I've been looking for in my news stories.
No, I definitely do think there's a larger, I mean, it's hard to speak like worldwide, right? 8 billion people are hard to speak for,
Right.
but it does feel like in America, maybe, or at least in as far as I can see, there's a pining for authenticity. I think something that gets lost a lot in a lot of conversations about, politicians is the authenticity. I think goes a really long way. It's one of the things that people, though I think they're wrong, it's one of the things people like about Trump. They perceive him to be authentic because he just says whatever's on his mind. Again, I don't
Right.
agree, but it's something people crave, right? And money moneyed influence makes things inherently inauthentic, and I think more and more than ever in my life, the average person can identify that. I saw a poll the other day. It was something like 72% of Americans identified billionaires as like a problem to American society. And I have to imagine that's the highest number since the New Deal, that
Yeah.
of Americans who hold that perspective, right? And boy, what a political opportunity that would be if only we had a party that represented that view. Whatever. This is not a politics podcast. That's not the point I'm trying to get at. But what I'm trying to say is people crave authenticity, and like I said, moneyed interest is inherently inauthentic because it's not about being true to anything. It's about appealing to the lowest common denominator. And so are people gonna reject these big money things? I don't know, probably not. But there will be a large enough subset of people who are just absolute sick of the inauthenticity that will turn to things like lower league soccer, or fingers crossed podcasts about lower league grassroots soccer, right? Um, so I don't know. Will it ever be like the majority opinion to like turn away from these big moneyed interests? I don't know. Probably not. But I think there's a growing, but always existing, but currently growing number of people who just crave authenticity. Like that's really the number one underpinning they're looking for. And you'll find that in these more localized lower league sports settings.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you definitely will find it in the lower league settings. To go back to something you said, you have to have your, I know we don't have a true pyramid here, but even if you just think of it that way as a pyramid structure, your ecosystem, you have to have a top,
Yeah.
and you have to have something to aspire to. And there's going to be people who are upset with what's happening there. But if there's an alternative,
Right.
which I think we're starting to see a more robust development of our lower leagues. I mean, we're seeing at least what it looks like on the surface, for USL. Outside really a building out more of the lower leagues, a little more cohesive and professional. But we're seeing on the women's side as well that in the pre-professional range, but we have hundreds of these women's teams across our country. Like we just kind of get it to take that next step or get a few more of them so there can be some better regionalization. But I do think there's a group in St. Louis right now that I think they were involved with the USL team, and I'm not sure everything about it, but I think they were involved more with the USL team. That went away, kind of did the MLS thing, but kind of missed what they had. And sounds like they're, like we want to try to be in the Open Cup. We want to try to, we want to represent St. Louis, and we want to represent our community in a way that's not being served by these top teams. And there's going to be
Or
fans who want to do the top teams all the time, but I think there's a huge segment of soccer fans out there that, as you put it, want something a little more authentic.
yeah. I was
In
going to
their
say that
experience.
another way to describe what you're saying is, but you got there. So, yeah.
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 Instead of feeling like I'm a customer all the time or I'm being gouged, like if I want to see these top level players. And again, we've had these conversations. I mean, you look at college football and the interest every year and all the crazy stuff that happens and the high turnover of players because people theoretically are only there 4 or 5 years. But you got high turnover, but it's more about the community And it's
Hmm.
about having things that sustain over time, whether it's the bands that constantly play, and then, even as you bring in new people, it's creating that atmosphere in the stadium. We do this already. We mimic what the rest of the world does in football. We just do it in high school and college sports, is where we tend to have that community kind of happen. But because of the way it's shaped with, you know, college is the stepping stone to professional sports, because that's the way our sports have evolved in this country. Um, we don't really have that pyramid kind of situation in any of our sports. We're starting to get there in soccer, but you know that community aspect, I think you can see that people really crave it. They love going to college sports. Look at women's volleyball right now, absolutely exploding at the college level. I mean,
I am
really, I mean, how many?
Oh well, sorry, pro level, but I am officially,
Yeah,
as of last week, a San Diego Mojo season ticket holder. So yes, women's volleyball blowing up.
and the you know the environment of the matches, and I think, again, I've said this for a long time, but I think there is a misperception across our country about what the dominant sports are, what sports, that people always want to see. And I take this from my teaching experience. There when I mean, retired now, but when I was in the classroom, there were very few of my students who really supported an NFL team, had any kind of passionate feeling about the NFL. But they all knew stuff about the NFL, because if you turn on any of our other sports channels, it's fed to you all the time. And I think some of the perceptions in this country about what sports people really like are historical things. It's done by the people who are controlling the linear feeds on some of these networks, and with, you know, I I've heard and seen arguments on ESPN and some of the reasons ESPN doesn't cover soccer as much, or things are shifted, or they're not on their linear channels as much because they don't get as big an audience. But I also think those fans, they found other ways to go watch and view their sport because it was never really offered to them. What's offered to them are our traditional big sports, and most people know about them because if you flip through the channels, that's what's on. So you watch it a little bit, you watch it in a bar because it's on, or somewhere else, and you get to know a little bit about what's going on. But when I was in the classroom, kids did not, especially male students, baseball, a little bit the Padres, whenever the Padres would kind of have a spike in performance. Football, almost nobody. But the NBA and Champions League soccer, those were the two big things that people were really invested in. And maybe college basketball when the tournament rolls around.
Well,
But
and I
that's more an event.
that's super interesting, honestly. And I think, without having spent a lot of time thinking about it, because I'm just hearing this anecdote now, I wonder if maybe something to do with that is the way that the NBA over the last 25 years has tried to emphasize the cultural side of the league, right? Like embrace the players, embrace their personalities, embrace the things they're interested in, as like a cultural phenomenon. And so I wonder if that had something to do with it. And I think that's kind of an interesting discussion to have. Um, but yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. You talk about what you're essentially talking about is the big, like, cable, like, news sports channels being the gatekeepers of sports information, right? And
Yeah.
they can talk all they want about, like, well, we don't cover soccer because people don't watch it. And they're framing it as kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? Like, well, we're asserting that, like, people don't watch soccer, so that's why we don't cover it. But much like the chicken and egg situation, if you actually think about it, the answer is actually pretty obvious, that the egg came first because evolution. And people don't pay attention to these things that they don't cover because they don't cover them. And
Yeah.
so people in this new era, and it's kind of similar to what's happening with, like, news, right? Like places like CNN or CBS are you'll see them decry their lack of ability to gatekeep information anymore. And it's
Right.
because of one of the few good things that's come out of the internet in the modern age is the democratization of information. Like, yes, sure, the internet has been a terrible Pandora's box unleashed on humanity in its current form. However, the ability to go to YouTube or, whatever, Twitter, BlueSky, whatever else, Instagram, and get information about sports, news, politics, like, people don't need the gatekeepers anymore. And that has allowed people to develop new opinions. And it's really shaking the landscape of American information.
Well, I mean, the fact that the two of us can do a podcast like this, right?
That is
That
exactly, yes, 100%.
that the cost barrier is not prohibitive. You can use basic, simple tools to do a decent informational show about a very niche topic.
I think you're understating how niche it is, but
Well,
yes.
but the fact that anyone can do this,
Right.
and it's not, the information is not all controlled and at a certain level, is very different, and it is democratizing, as you said. And now there's just so much of it, right? And part of that sifting through, but I still feel on the linear channels this thing like, well, people aren't watching this. Well, yeah, but okay, maybe they're not. But even if look at your football match that you had and you're getting whatever ratings for, how many people were doing other things like on devices, on shows, on Netflix? I mean, we have data for that, and we keep seeing some of those things are dwindling in numbers. They don't have the same relative numbers of a captive audience that they did before. When we had, like, I was growing up, 3 networks, and for a time in my life, 12 channels on cable before cable expanded beyond that. Channels 2 through 13, that's what you had. So you could show up to school the next day, and everybody kind of had the same conversations because everybody's watching the same news, the same TV shows at night, the same things. And now, I mean, one good thing about that was there was, I'd say, you know, more of a sense of shared community. I wouldn't necessarily call it better community, but more of a shared community. There's more common knowledge. But yeah, I think you get some gatekeeping there for better or worse with those linear channels, and I think that's going to change over time as the whole media landscape changes. I had a point here, and now I feel like I just kind of wandered off down a
Something
trail, so
about
I'm going to stop there.
gatekeepers. Maybe. No, you're good. Whatever. We're riffing here.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, like, we talked about some of the big things. Was there anything, I feel like I talked you into this, twisted your arm way back in the beginning to come and join me on this journey.
Oh no, not at all.
But I would say where we are now is a little different than what I envisioned when we first started. But before I get to some of those reasons why, was there anything that you thought we might cover, or we thought we might do that we didn't get to, or that maybe we should try to get to in 2026 that we didn't do this first year?
I don't know. I haven't really had any time to think about that. No, as far as the first question, like, was there anything we should have covered that we haven't? I don't think so, because, and I think I tried to make this pretty clear when I came into working on this with you, was that, like, I don't really have any, like, there are topics I'll suggest, but I don't have any, like, agenda or, like, things that I'm hell bent on communicating. Like, I'm mostly here because I enjoy the sound of my own voice, and also soccer, and, like, sitting down and having a drink and chatting with you every week. So, like, I didn't come into this with, like, a preconceived kind of notion of what it would be or what I wanted out of it. So to answer that first question, no, not really. What would I like to talk about in 2026? I don't know. I know it's an American grassroots soccer focus, but one of the things I absolutely adore about soccer is my ability to pull up, like if I, whenever something geographically interesting comes up, like I was reading about Tajikistan the other day, so I pull up on
Yeah.
Google Maps, right? Then I pull up FOTMOB and I'm looking at Tajikistan's football association, and like I didn't find anything overly interesting, but sometimes when you do that, you do find interesting things. So I wouldn't mind if we, talked about random things like that. I'm hopefully going to Greece next year. Like we could talk about Greek football. I don't know if I'll do anything
Yeah.
with that, but I I went to a game in Split. Croatian football is something that's always on the forefront of my mind. Like, so maybe things like that, we could expand the concept of lower league or grassroots, right? To like more just things that aren't the mainstream. I think that would be interesting. But as far as like things we need to talk about or should be talking about, I'm pretty happy with how we've ended up here, or where we've ended up, I guess I should say. Um, I enjoy this. I look forward to it every week, so I really have no complaints.
Well, good. I agree. I wouldn't mind doing anything outside of the United States. I mean, we do kind of have that in the opening, about
Hmm.
San Diego, the U.S. and the world. Um, and I think soccer. One of the reasons it's beloved around the world is even though you may not speak the language or understand all the culture, the game is played the same everywhere, and you can appreciate a lot of these stories, especially that we see at lower league and grassroots levels, no matter where they happen around the world. And I think they have relevance to people everywhere. So we can certainly look in. I mean, we're going to be kicking off 2026 with the Oceania Pro Football League,
Yes,
right?
very excited
That's
about
one of,
that.
one of the things we're going to be looking at. So we
Yes.
we already have something we've penciled in. Um, I will say though, for me, I I am happy with where we are with the show as
Oh,
well.
100%. Yeah.
But the big reason for starting the show initially was to be a supplement to my soccer short series.
Sure.
And due to health reasons, I haven't been able to get out to do the level of recording and filming necessary to really put some of those episodes together. So, in that sense, I really thought we'd be talking a little bit more, some behind the scenes and what we were putting together with some of the episodes and focus on those things, which I hope will happen at some point, hopefully in 26. Um, but that didn't happen. And I think because of the historical stuff we did, which was also from quite a bit of listener feedback, people really liked, like you point out, the story in Japan and the historical background for pyramid structures for various countries and some of the things we did in San Diego soccer history. Um, so I think in 2026, what I will try to do, because I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to get out and do the filming for, like I did for the old traditional soccer shorts episodes. Um, and maybe this is because I've just been wrapping up Ken Burns' American Revolution. But maybe since I can do something like that here at home and put some video pieces together as we've just been talking about them as we go through the research here on the podcast, but the ultimate goal is to put something together in video form, especially for the San Diego soccer history. So, hopefully there'll be some of those coming up in 2026. So as we get the research kind of nailed down and get a story put together, we could do because it's from 100 years ago, do a Ken Burns more style little documentary of the very first San Diego Soccer Football League, right?
I
And some of the
would,
teams and
yeah. So a couple of things. I would love that. I think that would be interesting. As far as like physical shooting and capturing, images and video, let me put you in touch with my brother. He is, trying to build a brand for himself as a photographer, and he's done a lot of Wave games, did Loyal games back in the day.
Right.
I think maybe Weston might have set him up with an SDFC game. So anyway, remind me after the show to put you in touch with my brother. I think that's something he'd be interested in, and he's a growing soccer fan. But the fact that you mentioned Ken Burns specifically on a personal note is pretty hilarious for me, because God, I think it was middle school, so this would have been like 2007 probably. I had a teacher who, she at the time she was one of those teachers that you thought of as kind of a stickler, but like looking back, she was one of the best teachers I ever had, and she was passionate. It was my U.S. history teacher in 8th grade, I think it was. And she had us do a video project where we had to make a Ken Burns style documentary about women's suffrage. And my buddies and I went all out, and I did this like character with a Boston accent, like the thing you gotta understand about women's suffrage. I thought it was awful, but we ended up getting like an A++. She loved it, and it was just fun because we literally just were like, all right, we're just gonna do the Ken Burns like documentary or interview and pictures format with like voiceover. That's it, and it honestly it was a lot of fun. It kind of helped understand the merit of the forum a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, if done right, I mean, I think the reason his documentaries are so successful,
100%.
you can convey a lot of information and kind of get, newspaper. I mean, because it's what you have to go on when you're talking about things that are from more than 100 years ago. So if we're looking at San Diego stuff, you're getting newspaper clippings, and there's no one really alive from that time. I don't even know. I mean, I've done a lot of genealogy research, so I have some skill there. But haven't had the time, but I've been wanting to look at some of these characters like Jack Lamb and some of these other people from that time period to see if there's any descendants that are still in San Diego, possibly. And might be someone like who might have some information, or maybe talk to them, or even maybe they're not even aware of something about their great great grandfather. Yeah. But I think we mentioned at one time there was a trophy that was put together by Jessup Jewelers, which is a big jeweler here in San Diego that's still around. So I haven't had a chance to get out and talk with some of them yet. But as we do and we're able to put some of those together, I'd really like to get some packages put together for those, whether it's a 10 or 15 minute piece, depending on what we're talking about. Would love to start doing a series that then could be up there for people to see and have and know about our local history here in San Diego. And along those lines, I stumbled across, I was looking up something about San Diego State's men's soccer trip to the NCAA final. And that was when I was in school there. Eric Winaldo was part of that team, and several other people. This would be cool. And I started to dig in to what I could get in, what was available to me online, to the Daily Aztec is the school newspaper, get into their archives. And you can't get into everything without actually being on campus. But I started to find stuff of soccer. Like officially, soccer didn't start on the men's side at SDSU until 68, I want to say, somewhere around there, about the time the NASL started in the country. But there were clubs and teams that were playing, not intramurals, but like a San Diego State club soccer team, and it was playing against some of the adult teams around. So then I started to pick up names of other teams, like the Portuguese Americans playing out in Point Loma, and like these different groups. So it gave me another avenue into some other things that were happening post World War II, and we haven't even gotten to that, with our series yet, which we'll dive back into in 2026. But with just another avenue, which I didn't even think about when I was thinking about looking through newspapers before. And I was like, I really need to get in and see what I can find via UCSD, San Diego State. and dig a little deeper into what was happening, because that post World War II to 1968, I believe, is when um, the the Toros were here from the NASL for one season. And that I think that's when most people kind of think our soccer history kind of started there in the late 60s. So I really want to try to help fill in those gaps that happen, not just what we've already talked about on the podcast from the early 20th century, but also that kind of, I think, is a dark age in general in American soccer post World War II to the start of the NASL, which kind of coincides with, your Red Scare and, being maybe your McCarthyism, all that other stuff of really supporting American and American things and turning people off to foreign kind of sports. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out here and which groups helped keep the sport alive during that time period. But that's something I'm hoping we can dig a little bit deeper into in 2026.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
All right. And I'm sure as we go through, we'll still do our kind of current events and look at, right, whatever the kind of big stories are that are influencing the sport that have some kind of influence on the soccer ecosystem in this country. But you had talked about branching out and looking at some of the stories we can find internationally, so we'll try to do that as well. But I would like to make a plea for whoever is listening. Please give us some feedback. Let us know what stories you enjoyed. What I've heard the most from is people like the historical and finding out new things. It doesn't always have to be history, but finding out things that they didn't know before, which certainly falls into some of those stories we could do on an international level. Sure. So if there are ideas, please reach out to us. Let us know. Really enjoy getting the feedback from people, what they like, what they didn't like, any of those. It does help us shape the show a little bit. And I think some of those early comments about the history really kind of helped us dive a little more into some historical perspective on San Diego. And frankly, I have found that thoroughly enjoyable going through that and just learning and uncovering some of our history, because as far as I know, no one has done that here locally, at least going back really far, looking at our soccer histories. So hopefully we can uncover some of that and put some videos together and have those for people sometime in 2026.
Definitely. Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, Dylan. I think that kind of brings us to the end here of not just this show, but I guess we'll call it our first season. Right?
Sure.
2025.
Yeah, sounds good.
As we always do, what are your soccer plans for the week? But we're going to be taking 2 weeks off here for the holidays and give me some time to try to get some things prepped and ready for 2026. So we won't be coming back till first Tuesday in January. I don't have that in front of me. I probably should have had that.
That looks like it would be
that
the
up here in a second.
The 6th.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean England does the festive fixtures, so I think that'll really be what I'll be looking out for.
Yeah, I guess one thing tomorrow. So if you're listening to this here on YouTube, because the podcast one probably won't be out in time, but Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. is the Intercontinental Cup final, which I really wish this had more publicity and interest from people, because I think of it as our true club World Cup. But the final will be tomorrow between Flamengo and PSG. And at 9 a.m., I think on BN Sports, but I will probably be checking that out. Of course, we have some Women's Champion League stuff that is coming up. On the rest of this week, some of the Conference League, I'll probably be seeing if I could follow Bradford a little bit since I've been enjoying that. And of course, be following any of the USL and NWSL labor issues. And then just like I said, put in some time to get ready for 2026. All right, so I don't think we have Dylan at the moment, so I'm just going to keep plugging ahead with our wrap up. So, again, like we mentioned before, we'd love to hear from you, and especially what kind of content you would like to hear more of in 2026. You can leave us a comment here on our YouTube channel. If you're on BlueSky, you can leave us a message at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. You can also, if you're listening to us through any of the podcast apps, if you look at the top of the description, there should be a link where you can send us a text, and you can send us a text with your question or comments. Or, as always, once we're back in 2026, I believe we'll be on the same schedule. We'll be going Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time, so you're welcome to join us live. So, Dylan, any last comments before we head out for 2025?
Oh, I don't know. What a year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to be insightful, and now I'm just drawing a blank. I have enjoyed this project very much. I'm looking forward to whatever comes of it next year, and however we can expand it to the more long form content, kind of like you mentioned. It's been an interesting year for San Diego soccer. I know Wave had kind of a tumultuous season. I think San Diego FC did better than anybody expected, and won over more hearts than really anybody expected. So good for them. Duran Free, perfect save percentage in the playoffs. I don't know. I think that's a good note to end on.
Right. Okay. Well, Dylan, I'd like to thank you for being my partner. Did you have one more?
Oh no, I'm just.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you very much for being my partner here for the year, especially here in our first season. And like I said, a lot of fun. And thank everyone for listening and sending all your feedback. And that wraps up our first season here for 2025. And we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks, January 6th. Bye.